The standard today is 8.EE.5. Understand the connections between proportional relationships, lines, and linear equations. And our essential statement is I can graph a line using an XY table. Since we are now starting to graph lines, we're going to go ahead and introduce that by graphing using a table. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and have the steps here to the left, and these are the steps that we are going to use to graph a line, a linear equation, using an XY table. So here we have an example, okay? Our first example states graph y equals x plus 2 using an XY table. So if we look at the steps to the left, let's go ahead and follow them. So the first step is to write the equation. So here is our table. I have it drawn out for you. You can obviously draw this out yourself. If you're ever doing work, normally people just have an X and a Y column, but I like to break things down so that you can see exactly what we are doing when we are working on these linear equations. So we have the X right here, we have our work in the middle, then we have our y, and lastly we'll have our ordered pair. I like to put the ordered pair column over there because this will help us plot the points for our line. So the first step is to write the equation. Right here in the middle where we have our work, we're going to go ahead and write our equation, y equals x plus 2, okay? And that's what we're going to use to plug in our x values to get our y values. The next step is to replace the x with parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Whatever y equals is what we're trying to solve, x plus 2. So I'm going to go ahead and replace the x with parentheses. And I do it for all to make the process go faster. The next step is to plug in the x values. And here I handpicked these x values for you because I want to see a negative, 0, and a positive. Normally the x values will be given to you just like in this example. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in negative 1, 0, and 1. And then step 4 is to solve the equations. Now, these are just integer operations that you should all be familiar with. So negative 1 plus 2 equals 1, and that goes in our y column because that's what that equals. So y equals x plus 2, and when we solve that equation, we get our y, which equals 1. Negative 1 plus 2 is 1. Then 0 plus 2 is 2, and 1 plus 2 is 3. So now that we have our y values, we can go ahead and write our ordered pair. So our ordered pair is x comma y. So our first ordered pair is negative 1 comma 1. Our next ordered pair is 0 comma 2. And our last ordered pair is 1 comma 3. Now I will tell you this, okay, 2 points make a line. 2 points make a line. However, when we are graphing using a table, you might make some simple mistake or do something wrong right here when you're doing your work. And so that's why I pick 3 points so that you can see the pattern. And if your points follow a pattern, that means you have a line. And if they're kind of all over the place, that means you made a mistake somewhere. So go ahead and check your work and fix that. And the last step is to just plot the points and connect our line for our linear equation. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Negative 1 comma 1 is negative 1 comma 1 right here. Okay, 0 comma 2 is up here, 0, 2, and 1 comma 3 is up here. And yes, we have a pattern. I'm going to go ahead and connect my dots. Okay, draw my arrows at the ends, because remember, arrows signify a line. We are not just connecting dots. We are not just graphing a line segment. We are graphing a line, and a line has arrows at the end. And there we have it. Okay, this line right here is y equals x plus 2. All right, moving on. Okay, here's our next example. Graph y equals negative 2x plus 1. So if you notice, this is slightly different than our first example. Our first example was a one-step equation, and this is a two-step equation. So I'm going to go ahead and write it, negative 2x plus 1. And I will follow the steps that I wrote down to make life just a little bit easier for you. And then we're going to go ahead and replace the x with parentheses. So I have negative 2 parentheses plus 1, negative 2 parentheses plus 1, negative 2 parentheses plus 1. Now remember, when a number is next to parentheses, that operation is multiplication, and multiplication goes before addition. So you need to remember your order of operations in order to solve these equations. Then I'm going to go ahead and plug in my x values. Again, negative 1, 0, and 1. Now, they're not always going to be negative 1, 0, and 1. When you're doing problems, your x values might be something else. That's fine. You just plug in your x values into your equations. And then we go ahead and solve this. Negative 2 times negative 1. A negative times a negative is a positive, and 2 plus 1 equals 3. Negative 2 times 0. Anything times 0 is 0, and 0 plus 1 is 1. And negative 2 times 1 is negative 2, and negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. All right. And then we're going to go ahead and write our ordered pair. So our first ordered pair is negative 1, 3. I literally just took the x and the y and put it in an ordered pair. Next we have 0, 1. And lastly, we have 1, negative 1. All right. And now we're going to go ahead and plot these points. So negative 1, 3 is up here. Then we have 0, 1, and then we have 1, negative 1. Again, this does follow a pattern. If your points are somewhere all over the place, okay, and they do not connect to a line, then you made a mistake somewhere in your work. So go ahead and fix that and find your mistake. And then I'm going to go ahead and connect my points and draw arrows at the end, because arrows signify a line, okay? And this line right here, this pink line, is y equals negative 2x plus 1. We will be talking about the slope of a line in a future lesson, so don't worry about that yet. But you might see some differences and similarities in these equations. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next page. I did combine two lessons in one, so you can see both the lessons here. Okay. So I'm not going to go over the standard and the essential statement because they are essentially the same. And the date here is for both class periods. Okay. So we're moving on. Graph y equals 1/2 x minus 3. Now we have fractions in our examples. That's fine, everyone. The steps do not change one bit. The steps are all the same. So if you notice, I already gave you the x values. Yeah, the x values look slightly different than the previous examples, but that doesn't matter, okay? I tried to make it a little bit easier with our fractions. So step one was to write the equation, which I already did up here because we know that that is where our work and our equation goes. Okay, step two is to replace the x with parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. 1/2 parentheses minus 3. 1/2 parentheses minus 3. 1/2 parentheses minus 3. Okay, and then we need to plug in our x values. So we have 4, we have 0, and we have -2. Okay, this is where you have to think about your fraction operations. This is something you learned in 6th grade, and you should already know how to do this. Okay, so first is first. Multiplication goes before subtraction. So 1/2 times 4, or you can think about it as half of 4, which is 2, and then we have 2 minus 3. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. And then we have 1/2 times 0. Anything times 0 is 0, and then 0 minus 3 is negative 3. Again, if you need to use a number line for adding and subtracting integers, feel free to do so. And then we have 1/2 times negative 2. Or another way to think about this is half of negative 2, which is negative 1. And negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. Oops, negative 4. And then we're going to go ahead and write our ordered pairs. So my first one is 4 comma negative 1. Okay, how did I get them? Okay, I used the x and the y. My next one is 0 comma negative 3. And my last one is negative 2 comma negative 4. And then we're going to go ahead and plot our points. So 4 comma negative 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 1. 0, negative 3. And negative 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 4. Okay, even though my dots are kind of far apart or close together, it's still a pattern. And if I put my ruler down right here, my dots do connect. So then I'm going to go ahead and connect my points. I'm going to draw my arrows at the end because remember, arrows mean it's a line and not a line segment. And I have just graphed y equals 1/2 x minus 3. Okay, so the next two examples are actually slightly different. They should be a little bit easier because there's less work involved, but hopefully they don't confuse you too much. All right, so go ahead and split the bottom of your page of your notes into two. We're going to do two examples, okay? The first one is graph y equals 3, and the second one is graph x equals negative 2. Feel free to pause the video at any time to write these down. So when you're graphing y equals 3, here's our table. Okay, if you notice, I took out the work portion because there actually is no work involved here. Okay, so if I have my x values negative 1, 0, and 1, you look at your equation, you're like, what? There's no x there. What do I do? Well, that just means that any value that you plug in for x, y will always equal 3. Y will always equal 3. So any value I have for x, y will always equal 3. Literally, that is how simple that is. So when I go ahead and plot these points, I have negative 1, comma 3, 0, comma 3, and 1, comma 3. And if you notice, when y equals 3, it's just a horizontal line through y equals 3. And something to write, just kind of a hint to remember, okay? Whenever, yeah, let's write this down here. Whenever you have y equals a number, that is the sign for number. That is not a hashtag, people. Okay, whenever you have y equals a number, that is a horizontal line. Okay, that's your hint. Okay, whenever you have y equals a number, that is a horizontal line. Next, graph x equals negative 2. This one is slightly different because we have an x, okay, but we don't have a y. It's the same thing, though, as this one right here. You know that x will always equal negative 2, so it doesn't matter what you plug in for the y values. X will always equal negative 2. So it does not matter what you plug in for the y values. You can literally plug in whatever you want. So when we go ahead and graph those, we have negative 2 comma negative 1, we have negative 2 comma 0, and we have negative 2 comma 1. And then you connect your dots, and you make your line. So this is the line for x equals negative 2. And a hint to write down: whenever you have x equals a number, that is a vertical line, okay? So whenever you just have y equals just a number, that's a horizontal line through that number. And whenever you have x equals a number, that's a vertical line through that number, okay? So, again, we just did a lesson on graphing a line using an XY table. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Have a great day.